Saladin. It's a name you've probably heard. To his enemies, he was the great adversary of the Crusades. To his people, he was a unifying hero. And kind of weirdly, to a lot of European storytellers, he was the perfect chivalrous knight. So who was the real man behind this massive legend? The guy who could unite a totally fractured empire and retake the holiest city on earth? Well, let's get into it and uncover the story of one of history's most fascinating figures. So just imagine for a second, you wake up and you find this on your pillow. A poisoned dagger with a death threat pinned to it. And no, this isn't from some fantasy novel. This was a real threat left for Saladin by the infamous Order of Assassins. It tells you everything you need to know about the world he lived in, a world of constant, lethal danger. But his path to becoming a sultan with a target on his back, it started somewhere much, much more humble. Okay, so the man who would one day be Sultan of Egypt and Syria, the man who would take on the combined power of Europe, well, he didn't start out as a prince or a king. Nope, his rise to the top was anything but guaranteed. First things first, we gotta clear up a big misunderstanding. Saladin wasn't some Arab aristocrat. His actual name was Yusuf, and he was Kurdish. His family? They were mercenaries, basically soldiers for hire. He was not born into power. In fact, in a crazy twist of fate, his family was kicked out of their hometown the very night he was born. So that means every single bit of power, every title he ever got, he had to earn it on the battlefield. And his rise was, honestly, lightning fast. At 26, he joins his uncle on a military campaign into the political snake pit that was Egypt. Then his uncle suddenly dies, and the Egyptian ruler makes a huge mistake. He picks the young Saladin to be the new chief minister, thinking this outsider would be easy to control. Boy, was he wrong. Within just a couple of years, Saladin had completely dismantled the old government, taking all of Egypt's money and military for himself. So this is the turning point, right? He goes from being a general serving other people to an empire builder in his own right. He's got this incredible power base in Egypt, and he has some big plans for what to do with it. With Egypt locked down, Saladin looks north to Syria. His old boss has died, leaving a total power vacuum. And Saladin knows if he doesn't fill that void, one of his rivals, or even worse, the Crusaders, are going to jump at the chance. And his strategy was just brilliant. Step 1, he brutally crushes any and all opposition back in Egypt. Then he moves on Syria, but he's clever about it. He actually walks right into the great city of Damascus peacefully because the governor invited him. When his rivals finally get their act together and challenge him, he meets them at a place called the Horns of Hama and just obliterates them. The victory was so complete that the caliph in Baghdad basically had no choice but to make it official and grant him the title of Sultan. But you know how it goes. The bigger you get, the bigger the target on your back. Suddenly, he's got threats coming from every direction. You've got the leftovers of the old dynasties who want revenge, you've got the Crusader kingdom just sitting there on his border, and, of course, you've got the assassins who saw his rise as a direct threat to their resistance. This led to multiple attempts to kill him, including that one with the poisoned dagger we talked about. With his empire mostly under control, Saladin could finally focus on the one single goal that would define his entire legacy: launching a holy war, a jihad, to take back Jerusalem from the Crusaders. Remember this date, July 4th, 1187. This is the moment everything changes. It's the single most important battle of Saladin's life, and honestly, one of the biggest disasters in the entire history of the Crusades. So what pushed him over the edge? It was a Crusader lord named Raynald de Chatillon. This guy was known for being especially brutal, and when he attacked a peaceful Muslim caravan, breaking a truce to do it, that was the last straw for Saladin. He swore a personal oath that he would kill Raynald with his own hands. For Saladin, this wasn't just about politics anymore. It was personal. At the Battle of Hattin, Saladin's military genius was just on full display. He tricked the entire Crusader army into marching into the desert, cut them off from any water sources under a blazing hot sun, surrounded them, and then completely destroyed them. It wasn't just a loss, it was an annihilation. The military power of the Kingdom of Jerusalem was shattered in a single afternoon, leaving the road to the Holy City completely wide open. And this, right here, this is what created the legend. See, when the Crusaders first took Jerusalem back in 1099, they slaughtered almost everyone inside, a total bloodbath. So now, 88 years later, everyone was holding their breath, expecting the same thing. But Saladin didn't do that. Instead, he offered terms. People could buy their freedom, he ordered his men to respect Christian holy sites, he gave people safe passage to leave. This act of mercy was such a stark contrast to what had happened before that it cemented his reputation for chivalry, even in the eyes of his enemies. The news that Jerusalem had fallen sent an absolute shockwave through Europe. It immediately kicked off the Third Crusade, and this one was led by England's most legendary warrior king, Richard the Lionheart. And that set the stage for one of the most famous rivalries in all of history. I mean, you couldn't write a better matchup. On one side, Saladin, the master strategist who had united the Muslim world. On the other, Richard the Lionheart, maybe the best battlefield commander of his generation. Both of them were total legends in their own time. The whole crusade really became this personal duel between these two titans for the fate of the Holy Land. And yet, in the middle of all this brutal, bloody fighting, you get these just incredible stories of humanity. There's an account of a Christian woman whose baby was stolen and sold in a market. Someone told her to go appeal directly to Saladin, and he was so moved by her story that he paid the ransom out of his own pocket to buy the baby back and return it to her. It's things like this that show you why even his greatest rival, Richard, supposedly called him the greatest prince in the world. So after all the fighting, who actually won? Well, it's kind of complicated. On the battlefield, Richard the Lionheart was a force of nature. He won major victories at places like Acre and Arsuf, but the ultimate prize, Jerusalem, stayed in Saladin's hands. Richard could win the battles, but he couldn't win the war. So in the end, it was basically a stalemate. The two great rivals ended up signing a peace treaty. The war was finally over. Richard sailed back to Europe, and Saladin, the man who held Jerusalem, could finally rest. But his story and his influence on history were far from over. The treaty he signed was a final act of pragmatism. He agreed to let unarmed Christian pilgrims come and visit their holy sites in Jerusalem. But just a few months after Richard left, Saladin got sick with a fever, and on March 4th, 1193, he died in his favorite city, Damascus. Now get this, because this might be the most amazing fact about the man. When his treasurers went to look at his personal fortune to pay for his funeral, this is what they found. That's it. The ruler of a massive empire, the man who controlled all the wealth of Egypt and Syria, had given pretty much all of it away to the poor. He died with literally just 1 piece of gold and 40 pieces of silver, not even enough to cover his own burial. And that story right there helps explain his incredible, almost split legacy. In the West, his generosity and mercy made him a legend. The famous poet Dante put him in limbo alongside the other virtuous pagans. European novelists wrote about him as a noble hero. But in the East, he's remembered as the great unifier, the defender of Islam who pushed back the invaders and took back Jerusalem, a powerful symbol for Arab leaders even to this day. So we're left with this puzzle. Was he a pious warrior? A brilliant, ruthless strategist? A merciful conqueror? An empire builder? The truth is, he was all of those things, and that's what makes him so endlessly fascinating. It leaves us with one last question to think about. How are we supposed to remember a man who was so deeply respected and even admired by the very people he fought against?